Step into the candlelit grandeur of late Georgian England, where courtly intrigue collides with personal ambition. Meet Princess Charlotte of Wales, a bright spark in a turbulent royal dynasty, thrust into the spotlight by her warring parents and hailed as the people's princess before the term even existed. From her defiance of an arranged marriage to her heartbreaking final days, Charlotte's 21-year journey is a saga of scandal, courage, and hope that forever changed the course of British history. Imagine a lavish drawing room in late Georgian England, the soft glow of candlelight flickering across polished floors. Musicians tune their violins while ladies in high-waisted gowns and gentlemen in elegant tailcoats gather in hushed anticipation. This is the world into which Princess Charlotte of Wales was born, a realm of scandalous gossip, glittering social events, and endless political maneuverings. But for all the splendor that surrounded her, Charlotte's life was anything but easy. From the moment she arrived on January 7, 1796, she was thrust into the center of a storm, whipped up by her warring parents, her destiny sealed by her birth as heir presumptive to the throne. She would be celebrated, constrained, adored, and judged in almost equal measure, and ultimately, her tragic, untimely death would send shock waves through the entire kingdom. Though her story spans just 21 short years, it unfolds like a grand drama filled with heartbreak, rebellion, and hope unfulfilled. Her father was George, Prince of Wales, later George IV, a man known for his extravagant lifestyle, deep debts, and complicated personal relationships. Her mother, Caroline of Brunswick, was equally controversial, if in different ways, brash and unpredictable. She chafed under the restrictive conventions of royal life. When they married, it was out of political necessity rather than any spark of love, and the result was a union so famously miserable that their squabbles became fodder for gossip in every fashionable London salon. George found Caroline's manners appalling. She found him pompous and cold. By the time Charlotte came along, the marriage was essentially over, and each parent resented the other too much to unite even for the sake of their daughter. As she grew older, Charlotte would discover that her parents' mutual loathing touched every part of her existence, from where she was allowed to live, to whom she could visit, to how her name appeared or did not appear in official bulletins. It was within these tensions that Charlotte spent her earliest days, a plump, bright-eyed baby raised primarily at Carlton House. She rarely saw her mother, as George wielded custody like a weapon, allowing or denying maternal visits depending on how the political and personal winds were blowing. He had the power to do so. He was Prince of Wales, after all, heir to the throne himself. Caroline, on the other hand, spent increasing amounts of time away from court, engaged in all sorts of rumored escapades that further stained her reputation. The net result was a lonely childhood for Charlotte. She had governesses and tutors, of course, but they were employees, not family. She was taught languages, music, geography, and history, as well as the expected accomplishments for a princess, manners, court dances, and the like, but rarely did she experience genuine familial warmth. Inside the gilded walls of Carlton House, Charlotte grew into a boisterous child, quick-witted and strong-willed. Unlike other royal daughters who sat demurely in corners, she tore through corridors laughing, challenging servants to races, much to the scandal of certain courtiers who believed such behavior unbecoming of a future queen. Some suggested she reminded them of her mother, free-spirited, impulsive, but others saw a certain sense of resolve that might have come from her father. Despite the caretaker's best efforts, she was well aware of the tensions between her parents, and from an early age she learned that her every move could be used as leverage in their power games. George might promise her a new riding habit if she refused to see Caroline, Caroline might bribe her with a secret outing if she would feign illness when George called. These manipulations sowed confusion in her young mind, but they also sharpened her instincts, teaching her to navigate a social minefield with remarkable tact for someone so young. As she grew into adolescence, Charlotte became increasingly aware of the public image she carried. By virtue of her birth, she was second in line to the throne, and the people of England looked to her as a beacon of hope. The monarchy, in their eyes, was tarnished. George III's bouts of ill health, the Prince of Wales's rampant spending, and the festering scandal of his unhappy marriage to Caroline all weighed heavily on the national psyche. Charlotte, with her fresh spirit and undeniable charisma, seemed like a chance for a new beginning. One can imagine the throngs gathered on certain festive days, straining for a glimpse of the young princess as her carriage rolled by, the cheers that arose whenever she waved. In the midst of all this adulation, Charlotte must have realized that the press and the populace were shaping her into a figurehead of sorts, a people's princess, beloved for her perceived honesty and warmth, unlike many of her older, more jaded relatives. Yet the public's admiration did little to relieve the familial pressure she endured. By her teenage years, she was on a collision course with her father over one critical issue: marriage. Royal alliances in this period were rarely about love. They were diplomatic tools used to cement treaties, secure alliances, or strengthen dynastic lines. For George, a union between Charlotte and Prince William of Orange, heir to the Dutch throne, was perfect. It would shore up an anti-Napoleonic coalition, aligning Britain and the Netherlands in a time when Napoleon's ambitions threatened the stability of Europe. Charlotte, however, was horrified at the idea. The notion of living in the Netherlands, away from her homeland, repelled her, and she balked at the idea of having to part with her beloved English traditions. She famously declared, "I cannot quit this country, as Queen of England still less," a statement that caused uproar in court circles. When George insisted on the betrothal, Charlotte resisted with a kind of fierce energy that left courtiers aghast and the public delighted. The confrontation escalated until she attempted what became known as the Great Runaway. Defying her father, Charlotte fled her residence and sought refuge with her mother, Caroline. Though mother and daughter had long been kept apart by the prince's orders, ironically turning Caroline's house into a dramatic safe haven for Charlotte. Newspapers had a field day, portraying Charlotte as a brave rebel fighting for her freedom against the tyranny of a father determined to barter his daughter for political gain. In reality, Charlotte was scared, impulsive, and uncertain if her gamble would cost her everything. She spent a short time in a state of near panic, knowing that guards loyal to her father could appear at any moment and drag her back. Indeed, George threatened to confine her at Windsor if she persisted in resisting his plans. Yet public sympathy came to her rescue. Word spread that the princess was being coerced into a marriage against her will, and the masses rallied. There was talk of crowds gathering outside in solidarity, and rumors that Parliament might intervene. Faced with this embarrassment, George relented. The engagement to the Prince of Orange was canceled, and Charlotte emerged from the ordeal with an even brighter halo of popularity. This incident was a testament to the changing times. While George still held considerable power, the force of public opinion proved strong enough to protect Charlotte's personal choice. She was, in a sense, a pioneer of self-determination within the royal family. With that crisis behind her, Charlotte's life took a gentler turn for a while. Then came Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, a handsome German royal who arrived on the scene with a reputation for both military acumen and refined manners. In the midst of chaotic politics and the lingering gloom from the Napoleonic Wars, Leopold exuded a calm composure. Charlotte found in him a kindred spirit. Their courtship was a bright spot in a landscape otherwise dominated by scandal and strife. Though some in the court muttered about further German influence, many observers, especially those at higher levels of power, recognized that Leopold's impeccable credentials and personal charm could be advantageous for Britain's alliances. More importantly, Charlotte genuinely liked him. Their engagement was announced, and the wedding on May 2, 1816, at Carlton House was one of the most joyous royal occasions in recent memory. Royal weddings always attracted a fair amount of pomp, but this union felt different. It was grounded in real affection, a rarity in arranged aristocratic marriages of the era. Following their marriage, Charlotte and Leopold settled at Claremont House. One might imagine them strolling the manicured grounds, hand in hand, away from the prying eyes of court. Sources suggest that their domestic life was surprisingly harmonious, with Charlotte's vivacious nature balanced by Leopold's measured demeanor. She found in him a sense of stability that her tempestuous upbringing had lacked. He, in turn, admired her forthrightness, her genuine concern for the welfare of the people, and her desire to modernize the monarchy from within. They hosted dinners where the atmosphere was more relaxed than at typical royal engagements. Fewer rigid protocols, a mix of conversation that mingled politics with culture, even humor. For a brief time, it seemed as though Charlotte was on the cusp of a golden era. She had a loving partner, her father's hostility had lessened, and the public adored her. But behind that honeymoon glow, the wheels of destiny were turning toward a more somber chapter. Charlotte's mother, Caroline, was still making headlines overseas with rumors of affair after affair, including a scandalous entanglement with a servant named Bartolomeo Pergami. Charlotte, now a married woman and future queen, felt the sting of embarrassment whenever new gossip about her mother surfaced. She wrote letters lamenting Caroline's folly, aware that every rumor made the royal family look more ridiculous. Her father was hardly better. He flaunted mistresses, sank the monarchy deeper into debt, and generally carried on with a self-indulgent lifestyle. The press feasted on these stories, painting a picture of a monarchy rife with dysfunction and hypocrisy, with Charlotte and Leopold as the lone bright spots. In truth, Charlotte was not without minor scandals of her own. When she was younger, she had indulged in flirtations with officers like Captain Charles Hesse, drawing raised eyebrows among the old guard aristocrats who believed a princess should never exhibit such spontaneity. Even after her marriage, she sometimes spoke with blunt humor about court life, calling it stupid or tedious, remarks that occasionally made their way into the newspapers, courtesy of eavesdropping servants or unscrupulous acquaintances. Despite these lapses in decorum, the public forgave her. She was England's hope, the one shining figure who might rescue the monarchy from total moral and financial collapse. Critically, she seemed genuinely concerned about issues of governance, philanthropy, and the well-being of the populace. This delicate balance, her popularity, her role as a reform-minded royal, and her personal contentment came to a tragic end in 1817. Charlotte had become pregnant, an event greeted with nationwide rejoicing. At last, there would be a grandchild to continue the royal line, a new generation that might embody the promise Charlotte herself had always represented. The entire kingdom seemed to hold its breath in anticipation, eager for this next chapter. Leopold, protective and doting, brought the best doctors to Claremont House. Yet medical knowledge of the day was limited, especially concerning childbirth. Sir Richard Croft, the attending physician, prescribed the era's standard regimen, which included frequent bleedings and a strict diet meant to manage her weight. Unfortunately, these outdated methods only weakened Charlotte over time. When labor began on November 3rd, it started a harrowing 50-hour ordeal. Imagine the halls of Claremont in near silence, the hush occasionally broken by Charlotte's muffled cries or the worried instructions from Croft. Leopold stood by anxiously, pale-faced and terrified for his young wife. Servants whispered prayers under their breath, while outside the estate, word spread that the princess was in labor. Throughout the kingdom, people waited for news. By November 5th, Charlotte delivered a stillborn son. A wave of grief swept through the household, but there was relief that Charlotte herself seemed at first to survive the ordeal. She was exhausted but stable, or so it appeared. She managed to speak a few words, expressing sorrow over the loss, but also gratitude that her own life had been spared. Tragically, within hours, her condition deteriorated. She began to show signs of severe postpartum complications, likely hemorrhage or infection, though the exact cause remains debated by historians. The doctors, still reliant on outdated practices, could do little more than offer palliative measures. In the early hours of November 6, 1817, Princess Charlotte of Wales passed away at the age of 21, an event that plunged Britain into collective despair. News of her death spread rapidly. Church bells tolled, shops closed as a mark of respect, and entire families donned black armbands to mourn a princess many had never personally met, but felt deeply connected to nonetheless. Lord Byron, the famous poet, wrote a somber reflection calling her the only hope of a monarchy that had lost its way. Leopold was inconsolable. He reportedly held Charlotte's lifeless hand for hours, unable to accept that the woman he loved so dearly was gone. Sir Richard Croft, stigmatized by the tragedy and widely blamed for mismanaging her labor, sank into a profound depression. Less than 3 months later, he took his own life. Across the nation, there was a sense that something irreparable had been taken from the country. People openly wept in the streets. The mourning rivaled that of any monarch's passing because Charlotte was more than a future queen. She was a symbol of renewal in an era darkened by scandal and war. The aftershocks of Charlotte's death rippled through the royal family. George was said to be grief-stricken, though one wonders whether guilt also plagued him. He had been so consumed with his own machinations and extravagances. Caroline, upon hearing the news while abroad, reportedly collapsed in hysterics, convinced that her absence or neglect had contributed to her daughter's fate. Historians debate whether such remorse was genuine or one more theatrical display from a woman prone to dramatic gestures, but it seems likely that Caroline did feel a mother's anguish. She had, for all her faults, shown genuine affection for Charlotte whenever circumstances allowed them to be together. On a larger scale, the monarchy faced a genuine succession crisis. With Charlotte gone, George IV had no other legitimate grandchildren. His siblings were mostly middle-aged, some estranged from the notion of marriage, others embroiled in their own dramas. Suddenly, the race was on among the royal dukes to find wives and produce heirs. The fruit of this rush dynastic scramble was most notably Princess Victoria, born in 1819 to George III's fourth son, the Duke of Kent. That child grew up to become Queen Victoria, who had reigned for over 6 decades. In a bittersweet historical twist, it was Charlotte's death that cleared the path for Victoria's ascent, thus shaping an entire era of British history. Had Charlotte lived, Queen Victoria might never have worn the crown at all. Reflecting on Charlotte's brief life, it's evident that she stood at the crossroads of profound transformation within the British monarchy. Her experiences highlight the shifting tides of public sentiment. At a time when the monarchy could no longer expect unquestioning deference, Charlotte's personal choices and open defiance earned her widespread admiration. People felt she was on their side, an impression bolstered by her willingness to stand up to her father and by her open expressions of empathy. In private letters, she mused about how the monarchy might be reformed, how court expenses might be curbed, and how the monarchy might be more in tune with the people's needs. She was no radical revolutionary, but she represented a more compassionate, down-to-earth approach that endeared her to a populace weary of endless intrigues and extravagances at court. In the years following her death, Charlotte's memory was evoked in discussions surrounding her parents. When Caroline faced renewed scandal in 1820, including George IV's attempt to divorce her and bar her from his coronation, Charlotte became a powerful symbol that overshadowed them both. The public often contrasted Charlotte's supposed purity and promise with the pettiness and spite of her parents. Some pamphlets even circulated proclaiming that if Charlotte had ascended the throne, perhaps the monarchy would already have found a path to modernize itself. The subsequent popularity of Queen Victoria, whose moral and familial focus shaped the Victorian age, owed something to the romanticized memory of Charlotte, whose end left a vacuum that Victoria ultimately filled. Leopold, for his part, never truly recovered from the loss. In 1831, he became the first king of the Belgians, a position he accepted partly to find new purpose. Still, he carried Charlotte's memory with him, preserving letters, commissioning portraits, and ensuring that her legacy survived even beyond Britain's shores. He later married again, but his private diaries revealed that he never forgot his first wife, calling her his angel and the one true love who forever shaped his perspective on governance and responsibility. He practiced a brand of constitutional monarchy in Belgium that may well have been influenced by the forward-thinking exchanges he once shared with Charlotte. It's striking to consider how many echoes of Charlotte's narrative are found in later royal stories. Young heirs weighed down by family dysfunction, public adoration directed at figures seen as refreshingly authentic, and the intense heartbreak of a popular princess dying young, as the 20th century would witness with Diana, Princess of Wales. In each case, there's a fascination with how these charismatic individuals attempt to navigate the complex machinery of the monarchy, caught between duty and personal desire, between tradition and change. Charlotte's tale resonates because it captures that tension in a particularly poignant way. She was taught to be a figurehead, while also being expected to remain quiet and submissive, an expectation that she defied to the delight of many and the horror of a few. Her tomb at St. George's Chapel in Windsor became a site of pilgrimage for those who sought to honor her memory. For decades after her passing, visitors left tokens of respect, from poems to sprigs of flowers, as if clinging to the possibility of what might have been had she lived. The national outpouring of grief was an early demonstration of the public's capacity to emotionally invest in the monarchy, to see it not just as an institution of protocol, but as a family that could reflect the joys and sorrows of ordinary life. In that regard, Charlotte was a revelation, a princess who had flaws, who loved earnestly, and who tried to craft her destiny within rigid confines, only to be halted by fate.